the whole nature of being a mother is very much socially created. And as we are in a period where we have so much more understanding of psychology and neuroscience, what it is changing. And we're kind of looking back at our own childhoods and seeing that we did not get what we are maybe giving to our children.
This is the Bad Mothers Podcast, where we dive deep into our maternal urges or lack thereof. We talk about the mothers we left or who left us, and whether they haunt our own choices about having children. Tam Stevens is a psychologist, trainee counselor, and PhD researcher whose work centers on family relationships, identity, and resilience. She runs a Substack, Family Estrangement, where she explores the complex realities of family cutoffs from both sides, those who choose distance and those who live through being estranged. Her writing takes in many forms of estrangement and aims to offer nuance and balance in an often polarized conversation, helping family members better understand one another's experiences. Across all her work, she's driven by a single question: how do we build resilient families with flexible, accepting communication? While I come at this subject very much on the side of the estranger, I've been so impressed with how Tam presents both sides in a very neutral and fair way. In this episode, we take a few minutes to tell you about our Estrangement Book Club, which is happening this Thursday. Then we talk about how a mother's priorities evolve over the life of their children, communication within families, both biological and adopted, and the perceived frequency of estrangement. Thanks for listening, and I hope you can join us on Thursday. Okay, I'm here with Tam Stevens to talk about both our upcoming book club and family estrangement and adoption. So welcome, Tam. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Monica. Thanks for having me on your podcast. It's such a great space you've created for people to talk about family complications.
Thank you. And you as well on your Substack, and that's why we have teamed up to do this book club, which is our first one is this Thursday, and it's just online for anyone who'd like to join, and we'll be talking about I'm Glad My Mom Died, the memoir by Jeanette McCurdy, which has sold millions of copies. Do you want to just say a little bit about why you wanted to be a part of this book club?
Yeah, so I thought, I mean, when you contacted me, it just seemed like such a great idea. I think books, memoirs, they can be such a good way of kind of seeing our own experiences being mirrored by someone else, so you feel less alone in them. And I also think I try to see my role in in the estrangement space as kind of trying to provide a balanced perspective. So trying to get us to see each other's points of view. So I'm hoping that I can provide that space within the book club to sort of get us to think about each person's perspective.
Yeah, I think you do a great job with that in Family Estrangement, your Substack, by what I really appreciated about it is that you don't pick sides. You just present the information and advice for anyone involved in estrangement, no matter what, whether you have cut contact or someone in your family has cut off contact with you. So I think that's really helpful to not make it like a one-sided debate and rather just helpful information. So I think the book club will be great. I come from, a literature background, so I think that books can change the world. So I think it will be really nice to just have a space where we can talk about what the book means to us, and people are invited to share as much or as little of their personal experience around the discussion of the book if they want. So, if you join and want to just stay quiet, keep your camera off and listen in, that's okay. And we just want everyone to feel welcome and, to join the conversation.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so that's Thursday, and I'll pop a link for the registration in the show notes for anyone who wants to join. Now, we just started talking about adopting our own puppies, just very casually, and it morphed into such an interesting conversation. I really wanted to have you on to talk about all the different things that the puppy thing branched out into. So, we've both, like I said, both recently adopted puppies, but you have children and I don't. And most mothers I've spoken to, yourself included, have said that having a puppy is actually similar in some ways to having a baby. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, I just want to have on the record, obviously, having a baby and a puppy, completely different. But in terms of the commitment and the physicality of it. But weirdly, like there were these moments where things would happen and I'd be like, oh, I've definitely felt this before. And a lot of it for me, I was thinking about it after our conversation, was because I think early motherhood, can't speak for fathers, but early motherhood involves, for me, I had like a real loss of confidence. I didn't know what I was doing. And I would find myself in the middle of the night breastfeeding, really tired, sitting on Mum's Net. I don't know if Americans have Mum's Net, but it's like a kind of online forum where it's supposed to be for mothers, but I think everyone uses it now. And you'd be reading these deep dives on how to get your baby to sleep for longer, how to burp your baby better, what you should be doing with your baby during the day, all these things. And it kind of felt a bit like hysterical almost. Like you feel like I'm losing my mind. I'm sitting up in the middle of the night and reading these forums. I'm trying to work out what I'm supposed to be doing. And then when I got my puppy, it was the same, except it was more Reddit than Mum's Net. But kind of sitting on forums, reading about other people panicking about their dog and not knowing how to get their dog to do things, and just that feeling of feeling a bit overwhelmed by the situation. And I think a lot of it is because when you get a dog, the one thing that's really similar to having a child is that it's like this bomb goes off in your life, and it's a bomb of like chaos and loss of control. Yeah, so I think that desire to go and read about other people's experiences and try and get an answer that can fix a problem comes from this sense that when you have a child, it's obviously a lot bigger, but with both a child and a dog, there's this loss of control. There's this bomb that goes off of chaos where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm doing a good job. I don't know if this little being is getting what they need from me. And maybe I'm failing. And so you kind of sit on these forums trying to find an answer because you're trying to regain control. You're trying to fix a problem. And it takes a while, I think, to get to the place which I also remember getting to with my oldest, of kind of getting to a place where you start to just trust the relationship and trust yourself and start to get the
Mm,
confidence to know that you don't need to go and sit on a forum to figure stuff out, that you can kind of trust yourself, trust the relationship, start to understand your dog, start to understand your child,
hmm
especially in the early bits, because obviously with a baby they don't talk either, so it has some similarities. You're trying to figure out a being that you can't
hmm
actually talk
hmm
to. So I think I think it was mainly that bit.
Yeah, yeah. Feeling like a bomb goes off for sure. I think for me with the dog, there was always I always knew, okay, this isn't forever. This is just for a few weeks or months, really, with a puppy. Whereas with a child, obviously, it
Yeah,
goes on for a lot longer.
yeah, it
Um,
goes on a lot longer.
you mentioned how you felt yourself change as your children got older. Like you were, you can focus on other interests and other things, work. What are your thoughts on the struggle to be a good enough mother, balancing those things? I guess it's an inherent feeling of guilt or responsibility, or maybe it's just, societal, that judgment, mum's net. How do you find that balance?
So I think, as I've mentioned, my youngest has just started school. So I've been going through a really big transition, I think, in most mothers' lives of kind of figuring out this new balance of yourself, a new relationship with your children now that they're out of the home for 5 days of the week. I mean, both my children went to nursery for parts of the week, but I would have parts of the week at home with them. And I think there's quite an interesting concept which is called matrescence, which is this idea that when you have a baby through birth, but I think there is some element of it that happens through other routes to parenthood, but where you go through this physical, psychological, emotional transition, and it's quite similar to adolescence. It kind of really shifts your whole identity and the whole way you're showing up in the world. And so I think a lot of motherhood is kind of navigating this constant shift in who you are. That is partly hormonal and partly practical. And so for me, I think it's definitely not that I've kind of returned to my old self, but it's kind of this shift of rediscovering who you are now that you have some time to be who you are.
Mm.
and um, and I think some of it is hormonal because you've come out of like this very hormonal phase of your life, and your body is like reshifting into running more for itself. And I definitely noticed that, like, more feelings of selfishness within me, more feelings of I want to do this thing, I want to go to that conference, I want to have time to do that piece of writing.
Mm.
Um, and so I think it relates a lot to what is a good enough mother, and trying to find that balance. So the concept of a good enough mother is this idea that you don't have to be a perfect mother, that what children need is a good enough mother. And within that, I think it's really important to recognize that what is a good enough mother changes all the time. It's changed
Mm.
enormously over like the last 100 years, in terms
Mm.
of what we expect mothers to do, and what mothers expect of themselves. So I'm going to bring this around to family estrangement because I think it actually relates a lot to it. This sense
Yeah.
that
Yeah, I can tell. Yeah.
yeah, like it is very related because we are in this period, it's called the psychological turn within child development. So it's this change to looking at children's inner worlds, the
Hmm.
big priority, where previously you would have just looked at outward behavior of a child. And it's influencing a lot of parenting practices and what we expect of ourselves as mothers. So
Hmm.
it's quite weighty, like it's very, very good, it's very good for the child. It's a lot better than maybe how people historically parented, but it's a sense that you are responsible for your child's well-being emotionally and mentally kind of all
Hmm.
the time. And I think a lot of mothers feel like it's pretty much on them. I don't think fathers put that as much pressure on themselves to meet this thing. So I find as a mother, as I try and have more space for myself to do things I'm interested in, I also have this weight all the time of, am I meeting my children's emotional or psychological needs? Am I doing a good enough job as a mother? Um, but I think where it relates to estrangement is that previous generations of mothers might have viewed what being a good enough mother was as like nothing to do with emotional,
Yeah.
psychological well-being of your child.
Right, right. They just maybe wanted to make sure you're fed, clothed, and housed, right? And that
Yeah.
was that was your job. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole nature of being a mother is very much socially created. And as we are in a period where we have so much more understanding of psychology and neuroscience, what it is changing all the time. But yet
Mm.
we are, and we're kind of looking back at our own childhoods and seeing that we did not get what we are maybe giving to our children in
Mm.
terms of looking at their inner worlds and respecting their inner worlds.
I think that's so interesting, and what you said about the hormones and rewiring of your brain. Um, I think, that is something that I can see myself as a pet owner. I didn't have that, so maybe that was part of my struggle to tolerate the sacrifice I made. But I guess that means once your hormones change, as you said, or as your children grow up, you might feel more selfishness or more, you know, desire to focus on yourself, at least some of the time. So then I guess the choice to be a good mother really becomes a choice you're making rather than a instinctual or hormonal response. So
Mm.
how does that change in yourself, change your parenting style?
Yeah, yeah. So I have to say, I mean, I'm a very academic person, so most of the things I think about are kind of embedded in research. So,
Mhm.
but within parenting, there's kind of pretty much accepted now that there's sort of three styles of parenting. So you've got authoritarian, which is pretty more what historic parenting was like. So it's very much more, but that's not to say everyone is always on a spectrum of these things, but that essentially is authoritarian parenting is about high control, low responsiveness. So you're not really looking at your child's needs or meeting them. You're kind of controlling them. And permissive is the other option, which is kind of very low control. It's quite warm and supportive, but you probably, in some respects, are also low in responsiveness. You're not necessarily looking at your child and what their needs are in the long term. It's more trying to be their friend now.
Mm.
And authoritative, which is the type of parenting that I think all the research shows is best. And it's kind of what you're trying to do all the time as a parent, which is to have reasonable expectations of your child based on their brain, but also be responsive to who they are. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I have always tried to be authoritative. It's
Mhm.
actually in the press, it's called gentle parenting, and there's been loads of negative press about gentle parenting. People think it's permissive parenting. It's not permissive parenting. It is about being reasonable in your expectations of a child based on their age and what they're
Mm.
capable of. The thing is with authoritative parenting is a lot of it is about just responding to who your child is and letting them go to the extent that they need you to let them go. So I think in terms of parenting style, it is a very hard journey on a mother because you are starting with a little baby and you're having to absolutely make them the focus of everything, and like authoritative parenting would say, well, if your child needs to be held a lot and you can, then you should. If your child is really highly sensitive and you can adjust your life to meet their needs as a highly sensitive child, you probably should try to. And a lot of that requires a mother kind of setting aside a lot of herself. But then as your children go to school and stuff, and I certainly don't know about you, but certainly as you become an adult, you want your mother to have her own life. You want your mother
Mm.
to be busy. I guess my parenting style is very much trying to meet their needs, meet my needs, give them space, let them have the freedom that they need,
Mhm.
not be overly enmeshed with them as
Mhm.
they move away, which is a gradual movement as they get.
Right. And I could see that being a complication. I've said this before. I've never understood these different parenting styles, but I do see that at least in my relationship with my mom, and I've seen it in lots of literature actually. We expect moms to give up so much when kids are young, and then, as you said, slowly shift their focus to the child's needs, or away from the child's needs, as the case may be, onto themselves again. And I think that doesn't always work, right? And then the mother becomes resentful that the child doesn't need them anymore. I know in my experience, my mom encouraged all of my going to college and studying abroad and all of those things, but I think she had a lot of resentment that I wasn't calling every day and that sort of thing because she'd given up a lot when we were young. So I can I can see how that would cause complications in mother-daughter, mother-child relationships, expecting those changes to happen, which I guess are supposed to happen naturally, but I think maybe as the child, it happens naturally for me because I'm just
Mhm.
growing up, right? But I guess for a mom, it needs to be much more um, deliberate.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it can be tricky to get the balance right. And I think it's interesting because as a mum, even the word selfish is like such an uncomfortable word for mothers.
Mm,
I mean, I don't know, I can't speak for all mothers, but if it feels uncomfortable, you feel like you should be always putting your children first as much as
hmm
possible. Um, but I think it's recognizing that actually, as your children grow and as they pull away from you, a lot of motherhood is letting go and giving them space and trying to somehow build your own things that work around them. And that is it's just a massive
Mm,
challenge. I don't know that men face as much of a challenge
mm,
within fatherhood and doing that, or that maybe fathers don't spend as much time thinking about these things.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And I think, yeah, selfish is always a hard attribute to own, I think. But I think it's such a natural human feeling. And as someone who doesn't want children, I think I've always said, yeah, I am selfishly, I don't want children. I know it's a selfish choice, maybe not for the child that doesn't even exist, but it's a selfish choice because I like my time and my space to be exactly how I want it to be, which is why a puppy has been so disruptive. But I think it's okay. I think we need to make it okay for people to feel selfish, including mothers at least some of the time. Like, obviously, you have an enormous responsibility, but it should be okay. And I think this is, again, is just my perception. If we made it okay for moms to feel selfish sometimes, then it wouldn't be so difficult as the kids grow up for moms to, have other interests or, shift their focus to other things when their kids want them to be shifting their focus to other things. It wouldn't be such an enormous change in the relationship. So that's just how my 2 cents on that, how I've seen it over, my own experience and other people who are estranged who I've spoken to.
yeah, 100%.
I want to shift a little bit now to adoption and how that relates to your estrangement research. So you study adoption as well. And when parents decide to adopt, I assume it's usually a lengthy and well thought out decision, unless it's taking in, a family member's child in sort of an emergency situation. Um, so do you think that thoughtfulness in adoption lends a different approach to parenting than maybe someone who just is unexpectedly pregnant and decides to continue the pregnancy?
Yeah, yeah, I do think it does. I think the process. So adoption is very different in different countries, and I do understand that American adoption can be quite different to British adoption. But in British adoption, it is a very lengthy process to adopt, and there is substantial screening, and there's a lot of recommendations that a parent takes time to process. Perhaps that, not some people choose adoption as their first choice for parenthood, but a lot of people will have gone through infertility, so they're encouraged to have like quite a long gap so they can process their feelings around not having a child through birth. So it is a very conscious parenting choice. And so I think that does create some differences.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no, if I think of when I had my children, if you wanted to attend some classes on parenthood, you could, but there were no requirements to. There was no let's vet you for whether you're ready to be a parent. Let's check your health records. Let's interview family members. It's a very invasive, difficult process to adopt.
Mm-hmm.
So it is really, really different. I think it's also important, though, to recognize that nowadays, for a lot of people who have children biologically, they also are making some level of a conscious decision. I think, a few decades ago, people quite often either would go into parenthood because it was just what you did.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of just the path. You didn't really think about it too much, or you would get pregnant by accident, and it was something that you just dealt with and processed and
Mm-hmm.
made work. People became parents a lot younger as well. So I think all parenting nowadays is quite often, for a lot of people, but not everyone, quite a conscious decision. But definitely adoption is a lot more. And I think it has some really good impacts on adopted families from the angle that I think adopted families are much more willing to seek support than birth families. Um, I think there's this idea we all have that family should just work. So if you're in a biological family, it should just work. You should just somehow, by magic, all just get along really, really well,
Mhm.
because of genetics and growing up together. And I don't think adoptive families have that expectation. They're much more willing to seek help from professionals. They're much more willing to have therapy. And obviously, some of that's because they're facing much greater challenges often than a biological family. But it's still interesting that they're so much more willing to seek help.
Yeah. Yeah, you said that in contemporary adoption, there's a big focus on communication within families. So, what do you think other families with biological children might learn from that practice?
Yeah, so it's interesting that because when I started writing my Substack, Family Estrangement, it was very completely disconnected. It was something I was just doing as an interest hobby. I didn't see it as having any relationship with adoption or children in care research at all. But I went into it very much my own viewpoint of estrangement, what causes it, my experiences, and my own lineage of people having difficult relationships with each
Mm.
other. And then I found it really amazing. Like, I really appreciate all the readers who've written comments or direct messaged me and told me about their experiences, because I think it's not a topic people talk about that much, and that people, you don't go into work and someone tells you that they find their mother really difficult necessarily, but someone
Yeah.
message you saying that, or you don't go to your I don't know, your doctor and he tells you that his son hasn't talked to him for 2 years, but people will share these things online. And there are some themes that you start to see between what works in adoptive families and what should work in non-adoptive families. And it is all around communication. Communication is just at the heart of family. Um, And what you see in a lot of families that really struggle is, and this is excluding, obviously, when I talk about estrangement, I'm excluding abusive families. That's
Mm.
really its own thing. But in families where there's no obvious problem that is obviously abusive, and it's more that the relationships are just really are really difficult. What you see is a lot of historically people within families having a lot of denial and secrecy and using emotional blackmail to get people to do things. I had a really interesting post from a woman who had a grandfather who was a Catholic priest. Obviously, Catholic priests aren't supposed to have children. And how it was all kind of shrouded in secrecy. People didn't talk
Mm.
about it. It became more than even what it was. Um, and you see that a lot in historic adoption as well. So historically, before people were getting good support with an adoption, um, there was this whole idea you just pretend the child's not adopted, you just as if it was your child. And people weren't doing that necessarily to be bad. It was just that was what people thought was the best approach with children, was
Hmm.
just keep it secret, don't tell them. But it created these really sad experiences for people where they would be trying to track down, they reach teenage years, think I want to find my birth parents, and their own parents, they'd have to do stuff like buy, pay for a PO box to get all of their post for
Mm.
tracking down their birth family because they didn't want their adoptive family to know they were doing it.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas now the advice is to just be very open in your communication, that is so core to having a family that can last the course. That if you can create with your children a high level of open, flexible communication, lots of acceptance of who they are, lots of willingness to talk about difficult topics,
Mm.
just makes your family bond a lot stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but they're Oprah and NPR's It's Been a Minute both did podcasts on estrangement this week. And Oprah's podcast I thought was quite good. I thought I was expecting it to be more imbalanced, but I thought it was pretty fair. But it did raise the ire of a few of some people in my estrangement circles because it called estrangement a trend, something trendy that's happening, which I'm sure is just sort of, a thing people do to promote. So I wonder. Oh, and I should say the NPR one I haven't finished listening to yet, but I think it's been very good in that regard. What do you think about estrangement? Is it happening more frequently, or are we just talking about it more?
Yeah. That is a big topic in estrangement, isn't it? Is it a trend? Are therapists making more people estranged? Um, is it part of the culture wars? Yeah, it's hard to know. There's not much in the way of meaningful research into estrangement, and it is hard to define what someone classes as. So, one person might say, "Well, my daughter hasn't contacted me for a month. We're estranged." Someone else might say,
Mm,
"You're not estranged, but it's been like 2 years."
hmm
Um, so there's that. Like, what is an estrangement? Um, I personally don't think it's increasing. I personally think if you were to talk anecdotally in families, you would see that people have always had some uncle that didn't show up to any family gatherings. Or I think it was easier for it to be less official historically. I actually think one of the biggest challenges in family life now is the access to each other, the constant communication.
hmm
You can, every single member of your family can contact you via email, phone, text, WhatsApp, Facebook,
hmm
Instagram. It
Yeah.
is so much contact. And it means that I think probably people feel that they need to officially estrange in order to get space
hmm
more than maybe they used to. Where before you could be like, I find my parents quite hard. I'm going to move to the other end of America. It's expensive to phone home. It's expensive to travel home. I just, I'm not
Yeah.
estranged. I just don't see them very often.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now people just, you can't do that. So I think there's that. I think it's more visible. I think people do talk about it more. I think in the past, people probably would just not have talked about it. There is an element that maybe is to do with the growth in the focus and knowledge about psychological well-being, that people are more likely maybe to think if this relationship is actively harming my well-being, then should I participate in it? And maybe people didn't really think about family like that so much in the past. I don't know.
hmm
I do also think one of the other drivers is to an extent the divisiveness we have in politics and viewpoints on things that I don't know
hmm
such a big thing in the past. And I think it can make it quite hard. I think there is a lot of media that makes a lot of money out of encouraging us all to have very polarized views on things. And
hmm
that can be really hard if you love someone, but they have a viewpoint that to you is untenable.
hmm
It can be so hard to retain a relationship because you will
Yeah.
God, like if you can hold that view, how can I understand you? And I think that
Right.
maybe contributing a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's not as simple as it used to be. My dad always says we don't need to talk about politics. But as you said, I think well, I would argue that our current situation in the United States at least, and more generally, as you said, on social media and just generally media, does really pit one side against another, and it it makes it really difficult to even know someone has an opposing view to you, even if they don't talk about it. And just saying we don't talk politics is, it used to be simple to say that, but now I think it's a lot more complicated
Mm,
for sure.
for sure. And I think for some people, I mean, I'm quite lucky because most of my family are not really on social media, but
Mm,
I think for a lot of people, they're really seeing their loved ones' viewpoints on things
hmm
because of
hmm
social media, because people are posting. And I don't know though that is contributing meaningfully to estrangement, but I think it can be the straw that breaks the camel's back. It can be that you already find a family member, you might find your brother or sister quite difficult, and then you see that here in the UK we've got reform and we've got some quite strong viewpoints people can have on things like immigration or trans rights, and I think whatever way people fall on those things, they can, if they see that someone that they already find quite difficult
Mm-hmm.
really on the opposite side to them. I don't know. I think we're just in this time where politics has become really personal. And also,
Yeah.
there are parts of it that obviously, if you are a woman or you are not white, that are
Mm-hmm.
personal to you. And
Right. Right.
or if you care about someone who is a woman or not white
Mm-hmm.
or gay or trans, these things become really personal to you, and it can be hard
Yeah.
to manage that.
I think, yeah, that's really important because I worry that the idea that politics is driving supposed increases in estrangement really trivializes
Mm,
the reasons for estrangement because on the surface it might sound like, oh, well, you just don't like the politician I like. You're not going to talk to me anymore. And that does sound ridiculous. But for the reasons you just outlined, it can be extremely personal and it can feel like a judgment on your own humanity. So it gets more complicated than that. And obviously, if that's the case, there's likely a lot more behind it in the history of that relationship.
yeah.
So that is the straw. Yeah.
Again, communication as well, because I think
Mm,
you can foster in your family the ability to just have uncomfortable communication, then I think it can be completely possible to have quite different viewpoints to family members and
hmm.
manage it. But
Yeah.
we don't have to live in a world where we all have to agree. But you want to have a family where you can disagree healthily.
How do you think parents and children can learn from each other's viewpoints on estrangement?
So again, this is something that I'm really trying to do through my Substack is try
Hmm.
and see everyone's viewpoints. Now, there are. I'm going to reiterate because I feel like people often comment and don't understand this about me. I completely know that there are some estrangements that are they absolutely must happen. I think
Hmm.
LGBTQ people often suffer a lot of abusive behavior from family members that they should just not have to have in their lives. And I think if you have been abused by your parents or you have an abusive sibling, like there is nothing you need to learn. That is a relationship that is healthy for you to walk away from. And you don't
Hmm.
have to try and spend any more of your life trying to understand or process it. Like you have every right to move on with your life. But in situations where the relationship is more nuanced, it's not so obviously that the parent or the sibling is the bad guy. It is more that there's something that's just not working in your relationship. There's causing you pain, but it isn't definitively someone is trying to be malicious. It's just trying to really show compassion to each other, trying to understand each other, trying to ask each other questions, trying to not get into uh, power struggles. I think it's this thing of you don't you shouldn't go into communication with someone trying to win or be proven right. You should be trying to understand and build connection. And I think in a lot of struggling family relationships, it's that both people have got very locked into who is right rather than let's try and understand, let's try and build a bridge. I think it's what we've just been talking about, being really conscious about communication. You don't need to change people's opinions on things. I think there are some issues that, get into territory, like you
Hmm.
say, where it's the politics becomes personal, but there's a lot of things where you can just accept that someone doesn't agree with you and try and just stay away from it, try and be
Hmm.
conscious about that. I think for parents, it's really important to respect your child's marriage, relationships, parenting, career, life choices, sexuality, these things, just
Hmm.
accepting them. Not trying to change them, letting go of the vision of who you thought your child was going to be and accepting your child for who they actually are, trying to love
Hmm.
that person and trying to understand that person. Again, though, with a child, it's understanding that parents aren't perfect. You don't become a parent and suddenly magic, you're like the most
Yeah.
wonderful mother or father in the world. You're still a human flawed, imperfect, and you will mess up, and you might be a parent that's, very self-absorbed, or a parent that is very prone to being too emotional, very prone to not being emotional at all. And I think with that, it's trying to see what your parent does do. So love is a verb, but it's cheesy, but it's
Mm.
true. If you can see evidence of things that they are practically doing, but what they're saying is kind of annoying. Trying to focus on what they're doing, those acts of love that maybe they're showing you love in a way that's not how you want to get love, but it is them showing you love. Trying to be understanding of that. Yeah, it's just
Hmm.
all of those things.
Yeah, yeah, it does come down to communication so much because I think all the time how many relationships might not lead to estrangement if I'm coming at this from the child's point of view. If we told our parents our grievances and they said, instead of being defensive, they said, I'm really sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry if I messed up. My relationship with you is important to me. Tell me what I can do. What can we do? Rather than, I think a lot of estranged adult kids experience, a rejection of whatever it is that they're saying. And then, they feel invalidated and then it spirals from there. I mean, that's my perception of how these things occur. And there's a lot of reasons for that, I'm sure. I can understand why parents feel defensive. They've given, their whole life to this child and maybe, they're shocked by what they hear. But I think it's so important, as you said, to communicate openly and not try to win, but just hear each other out.
Mm, definitely.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things that all of us could massively benefit from is realizing that there are multiple realities, that
Mm,
people experience things differently, and what you experience one way and what you're trying to do with your child and how they experience it are
hmm.
completely separate things.
Yeah.
And both people can be in the right. It doesn't have to be one person's the bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you share what you hear most commonly from estranged adults and parents with children who cut off contact?
Yeah. So, like I say, when I do hear a lot, where people have really big issues, so it is abuse, or it is they've lost their child because of coercive control or mental health challenges. So, that is definitely part of estrangement. But within the other realm of estrangement, what I kind of see the most is from the child, it's a communication gap. The child is like, I have told you that when you do X, it upsets me. And the parent is just not listening, not willing to change, not respecting that. Sometimes it can be that the parent is overly controlling, or they believe that in doing or paying for something, it gives them some right over a child's life, that the child doesn't feel they signed up to. With the parents, what I often see is blaming outsiders, and I get why parents do that because it's easier emotionally. It's so uncomfortable to think maybe you have done something to harm your child and your relationship.
Hmm.
I get that. No one you. I think the vast majority of parents really love their children and want to do the right thing. So I think sometimes it can be more comfortable to say, well, it's my child's partner, it's my child's therapist, it's this other person who's responsible.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that's not true. There are some really unscrupulous therapists out there. It is not a very
Oh, really? You think so?
any therapist who's had full good training
Hmm.
should never give directional advice. So in an ideal world, if people only saw really well trained therapists, it absolutely should never be the case that a therapist is encouraging someone to cut
Hmm.
off a relationship. They should be encouraging the person to see their own answer. But it isn't a hugely regulated, in the UK, it's not a hugely regulated
Mm. And
profession.
I guess people get a lot of advice from social media too, don't they?
Yes,
Which,
yes.
you don't need any qualifications to to get
No,
a lot of followers. Yeah.
exactly. But I do think with parents who think it is a therapist, that they need to be very careful that they're not um, kind of showing a lack of respect for their child. Like I think that if you, one would hope your child could not just be encouraged to cut off their parent who is a perfectly good parent
Right.
just because of social media or a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, your child has the skills to think critically about whether
Mm-hmm.
if they happen to be at a therapist encouraging them on that path, whether
Mm-hmm.
that is the path they really want to follow. So I don't want to say that there is no chance that there are therapists out there who are driving estrangement, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
personally think that a parent should put it on that. It discourages you from trying to fix things, trying to look at yourself, trying to
Mm-hmm.
reflect on what you might need to change about yourself. There's not much to be gained other than feeling very angry about focusing on that. There is more to be gained from thinking, well, what weakness did I create in this relationship that made it possible for someone to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
drive us apart in this way?
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Do you think reconciliation is possible after estrangement?
Uh, it's a really difficult topic. So I found it really interesting when I listened to your podcast with Gail Kirschenbaum
Mm,
about this topic. You know, is it possible? Is it the right thing? Um, I think in an ideal world, you would sense the relationship is going in a bad place and try and find a way to heal things. I think once an estrangement has happened, that puts a lot of damage in the relationship. And it is not, in my view, that feasible that you can reconcile and everything goes back to what it was before. I just think, unfortunately, the way relationships are, once some big event happens in you can't just go back as if it never happened.
mm,
And I think reconciliation often has this goal of like, let's go back to let's fix everything. Everyone forgives each other, everyone moves on, everyone's happy. Um, I think it's more about reestablishing contact, trying to reestablish or create a new relationship, trying to meet each other as who you are now, trying to process the things that have happened between you. I guess it just depends on, yeah, your personality and what you want and what you need. And I think reconciliation is almost more commonly needed by the parent than the child, because
mm-hmm.
as a parent, your child is very central to your life. As a child, you might be creating a new family, so it's not so central.
What I took away from that conversation with Gail is everyone's situation is so different. It depends so much on what the complications are in the relationship, what, each person individually has the capacity to tolerate. There's so much that is different across all of these different estrangements that you can't really have one, bit of advice to that leads to reconciliation, I don't think. Yeah.
No, definitely, 100%. It just really depends on what for the child. A lot of the time, sadly for the parents, the child may just feel a lot of relief about not having them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's quite hard for the parent to overcome because you've got to kind of come in and try and reestablish something with someone
Mm.
whose life feels better not having you in it, which is really
Yeah.
sad. And I feel very sorry for parents in that situation. But on the other hand, what I do sometimes see with parents is that they say a lot that they want the relationship to be resolved, but they have a lot of anger with their child. And so I think that's kind of what I'm meaning with the establishing a new relationship is to do that, both parties have to kind of let go of all that water under the bridge, and that's really hard.
Mm.
And so I think often with parents, it can be more about control. They want a reconciliation because they feel out of control that the child has taken the relationship away.
Mm.
And I don't mean that in a malicious way. It's just a massive shock to them.
Mm.
Um, and I think if you're coming at a relationship from the point of view of wanting to control it, it's going to be very hard for there to be a reestablishment. The reestablishment is going to have to be letting go of all that anger, letting go of that sense of, I did all of this for you. How could you stop talking to me when I
Right.
raised you? I paid your college fees. I did this, I did that. And then you did this. You're going to have to let all that go, like massively. But also with the child, they're also going to have to let a lot of stuff go and accept that the parent was who they were.
Well, thank you, Tam, for coming on and talking about all of this. It was really interesting. Again, the book club is this Thursday at 7 UK time, 2 o'clock Eastern time. And we should say, don't feel like you have to have read I'm Glad My Mom Died, although I highly recommend it because we'll share excerpts from the book and guide the discussion. Bad Mothers is written, produced, and edited by me, Monica Cardenas. I'd love it if you'd rate and review the show and get in touch with any feedback. You can find me on my Substack, and guess what? It's called Bad Mothers too.